Oh, Toya, you
Yes,
got like a little bug on your face.
I do.
April Fools. All right. Uh,
Oh gosh.
Hello, how are you? It's April Fools. We are officially in the second quarter. How do we feel emotionally?
Uh-oh, we got a thumbs down from
Uh,
Kendra.
huh?
I said we got a thumbs down from Kendra.
We don't feel good about the second quarter?
No.
I actually feel really good about the second quarter, and I'm going to give you a lead generation strategy here in a minute. But the first quarter, well, we could see in the numbers, but the first quarter, some years it starts off really fast. Some years it takes a little while to build. This year, it felt like it took a little while to get going. And I think a lot of people felt that um, because January was kind of slow, February was a little better, March got a little better, and most of the pockets of the metro, the metro Atlanta area, March turned out to be really good. But let's just kind of verify what we're feeling in numbers. So right now, Fulton County's got 772 active inventory, big drop over the weekend. Now, today is April 1st, and I do believe it was a holiday weekend for most. And a lot of people didn't put their property on the market prior to a holiday weekend. So I would expect this number to spike in the next 7 days. And I also believe you're going to see here in a minute that we've got a little bit of a realtor factor here, Rick and Toya, where they don't close their or change status in the MLS very expeditiously. So you're going to see some lag in numbers. Is that fair to say? Uh, so you're going to see we did 141 active under contract in the last 7 days in Fulton County. I believe most agents are pretty quick to change that status in the MLS. The 326 on the pendings in Fulton County is kind of an ongoing status, so it pretty stays pretty constant. Yet we had 235 close in the last 7 days, which looks way down compared to the last 2 weeks, which makes absolutely no sense because that should include the end of the month closings. But my guess, Toya, is if an agent closed a property, say Thursday, mentally they might have checked out and they're getting around to closing it out in the MLS today or tomorrow. So I actually don't trust this number. I think it was a whole lot more closings in the last 7 days. It's just got the realtor factor inside of it. So I wouldn't put a lot of weight on that. Does that make sense?
I would agree.
Am I being mean or is that just a reality of our world?
Low C's.
Close to close.
All right. But I do think active is still pretty healthy, knowing it's probably going to spike in the next 7 days. And the rest of these numbers look good. If we jump over to DeKalb County, and I do the typical scroll over here.
Hey, and Brett,
Yeah.
could you touch on using your line graph? Because I've seen a couple of I've seen some data that came out that show kind of the market prices declining and some decline as far as longer days on market and just the overall trend of the market slowly you could say stabilizing. Are you
Yeah.
seeing that in your line graph, or like is that they're just pulling different data?
Richard, I appreciate that. It doesn't show on this graph, but thank you for the opportunity to remind everybody on April 18th at 1 o'clock, we're doing the state of the industry again. And I will cover all that at the state of the industry around what's going on with pricing and days on market as we get what we need to happen is the month's got to close out and Chartmasters waits till about a week and a half after the month closes out to start pulling data. And we will get really, really good data that we'll have on the 18th at 1 o'clock, and we can cover that. But thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
All right. Active inventory to cab 425, a little bit down, not surprised. Active under contract 85, which has kind of been consistent. And then 194 pending. That actually is kind of an optimistic number for DeKalb County going into April. Because if you look at the beginning of March, we had 194 or 192, and we're at 194 going into April. And March was a really great month for closing. So the windshield looks good. And we had 132 closed. Once again, I don't trust that number. I think that number is going to come up in the next 2 days as realtors get around to closing out their transactions. If we hit the other third big county is Cobb. Come on. Inventory, same story. It just went down a little bit. I think it's just that holiday weekend, but 95 active under contract, 191 pending. There was 171 at the beginning of March, and there's 191 pending at the beginning of April. 145 closed, same conversation. Don't trust that's the real number. I think it'll be much more than that in the next couple days as realtors close that transaction out. 52 expireds, 24 withdrawns, and 13 holds. I think maybe, Richard, that might be speaking a little bit to your conversation. Not everything's flying off the shelf like it was in previous months, yet well-priced listings, well-marketed listings, well-staged listings are certainly still going for great asking prices. But we're definitely not in a market where everything is selling. We're in a market where great properties are selling and probably good properties are selling. Any comments on that, guys?
Brett, I would just say that I see 76 opportunities today, April 1st, and we have a great MOFR that I think that you're going to talk about a little bit later in order for us to have a conversation. So I always look at, the glass half full, and I see opportunities right with withdrawals and expires.
Absolutely.
Well, and the absorption rate still is pretty impressive, when you look at the active versus closed. So the one question you'd ask yourself that if I'm consulting a seller is what's the days on the market, looking like, and how is that evolving as things do slow a little bit in terms of historic, percentage of sales.
There you go. All right, so let's hit it. So this article is put together on research by Realtor.com, and this is your MOFR, but let's talk through it first. So predictability says the best week to put a house on the market for sale is April 14th through the 20th, which is coming up in 2 weeks. And the reason for that is the time frame combines an optimal mix of high list prices, buyer demand, and quicker sales, in addition to fewer price reductions and less competition from other sellers. So this is the reasons behind it. But the question is, one, what do I do with this information? So Toya, if you were talking to a potential seller that might be sitting on the fence, what would you do with this?
Absolutely. I would just say this is the best time to list. And when I'm thinking about why is there less competition for other sellers, we're getting right before peak season because we know the summer is coming. That's when we generally see a lot more sellers on the market. But this is also a great conversation for buyers too. So it's not just sellers, but also for buyers because there's less competition for buyers. Right now, we're looking at about 9 offers per house where we've come from 20 plus offers per house. So for the sellers, I think that, they have a competitive advantage because they're early adopters of getting on the market early and getting those prices closed and getting that property closed before other sellers come on the market.
There you go. Rick, I'm just sitting there thinking, I could put on social media today. According to realtor.com, April 14th through the 20th is the absolute best time to put your house on the market. That's going to get you the best and most favorable results in your favor. Curious about why? Call me.
Mhm.
And just stick it out there on social media and get people to raise their hand and go, what do you mean, why? And then you show them this article. But you're looking for people that are curious, right? It's a mofer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and analyze your local market so that you can be hyper specific so that it hits home a little harder. If certain markets spike earlier in the spring season versus later in summer, then just get really clear. Like historically, June, we see this spike in sales, this spike in listings. This is the time to beat competition. Timing is everything.
Absolutely. And it's not you giving an opinion, it's you showing them data that somebody else, third party, verified. And that's what this whole article is. I put the link in the chat, but it's on the Atlanta Business Chronicle. It's titled Price Trends, Buyer Demand Make One Particular Week the Best Time to List a Home. And that's where I think this industry update conversations, you're looking for dialogues, you're looking for scripts, you're looking for some kind of best practice that translates into conversation, translates into lead generation that in turn moves your business forward, right?
Yeah, you could also add, hey, call me for the top 10 things to do to maximize a return on your home sale. If you've even thought about selling in the next 2 years, call me so that you can line that up today. Or
Absolutely.
Again, is to get the phone to ring so that you
Yeah.
can initiate conversation around, hey, what's the benefit of moving fast and furiously versus the penalty or the likelihood things get better in the future or down the road or by delaying, and overlay their story with the market data and you'll be very compelling.
Yeah.
Brett, the other thing that I would add is when I was looking at those different opportunities for expires and withdrawn, this may be the conversation for those sellers to say, you know what, you might have missed that window, but here's the best window to sell your home, and here's why.
I love it. I love it.
Well, you can always go back to how many days on market for you to sell a listing versus the actual market. And anytime you beat the market, you're perceived an expert and, superior at what you do. So let me share with you how I've done this. It's another
Boom.
introductory, sort of a invitation to conversation.
So I pulled this article. Natalie put in the chat, is this every year or this year? I think the week moves every year, Natalie, but it's every year it's around this time of year. Downtown Atlanta office vacancy could reach 40%. Are residential conversions the answer? We have an inventory issue and we have an affordable housing issue. And I also think the commercial real estate space has some less desirable office buildings that are probably going to be painful for landlords if they don't find a solution. And I think the government's looking at incentives, and I think developers are looking for opportunity to reconvert some of this office real estate into potential residential conversions. What do we think about this?
A lot of these properties have changed hands in the last 3 to 5 years for premium pricing because the market was so hot. The other factor is that commercial lending typically works off of balloon loans that are, 3, 5, 7. A 10-year lock is extreme in the commercial world from my experience. So a lot of these are resetting at the new rate, interest rate, and they bought on rate and they bought on cash flow. And it may quirk up the dynamics of their profitability, and even worse, vacancy factors. Most people weren't factoring vacancies 3 to 5 years ago. So there's a huge opportunity on the commercial side for, it could even be bank or institutionally owned at some point in some cases. But also this conversion conversation does become a more valid potential, fallback.
We've talked a lot, Rick, about, and Toya, about new construction is kind of our saving grace to inventory shortage. But I kind of think of this conversation as new construction too. Meaning if we repurpose office buildings into residential property, in a way, it's new inventory to the market that didn't exist before.
Well, I'm going to argue that some of the competition that's creating vacancy, not just the post-COVID work from home scenario, which is a factor, is that there's a lot of mixed use development in the suburban areas where, you know, work, live, and play has become a real draw for some. So again, hyper local, you know, real estate, that's where you need to hang your hat on your expertise, because these conversations are very interrelated.
Not only that, I would mention that we're finding, speaking of being hyper local, just partnering with some commercial agents, because what we're finding is with our residential agents, their database is so rich with people that are looking at opening up their own business. So when you're talking about being hyper local in your neighborhood, mixed use development, we're finding that there are a lot of opportunities there. And just to your point, Rick, when you said a lot of these I guess, trends have ballooned out in terms of the financing, that's another opportunity where someone else can come in, you know, and be able to pick up something that's less than what they would normally pay for.
Oh, 100%. I mean, this kind of the story of what happened in West Midtown for a little while. You're starting to see it in West Atlanta or in West Buckhead, but downtown for sure. Let's see, right?
It'll be fun to watch.
I like it. Inventory is a big deal. All right, let's hit these. These are going to be fun. So I think the hot thing in our industry right now is the news media is not our friend so much in how they're portraying this NAR settlement. And the challenge with that is we can't control what our consumers are reading, but we can certainly control our response and how we position what we believe to be the truth, right? And this article talks about 7 mainstream media falsehoods that are kind of the storylines that are being published in the media right now, right? So the first one is the settlement forces real estate brokers to reduce their compensation. And that's absolutely a false statement. Yet, why is the media running with this story? And two, how do we respond to the consumers that believe this to be true, right? How would you respond?
I love the way that they put it. I think that we have to respond by saying everything is negotiable, and it has always been negotiable. That's just it. There is some education in terms of how we're seeing things negotiated at this time. But I do think it puts the power back in the hands of the consumer. And I think that's the part that we really have to think about, is that these transactions are between the buyer and the seller. Our job is to educate them through the process, not to dictate what it is, but to be able to also level up. I think we can earn more commission, to be honest, if we have a true value add with it. So I look at it as an opportunity, because the days of someone just putting a sign in the yard, that's over with. So we really do have to bring value, and I think it's a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, one of my favorite things I've been saying is there's always going to be a Motel 6 and a Ritz-Carlton. And the challenge of our industry is the Motel 6 and the Ritz-Carlton got paid the same as a buyer's agent on a transaction. Now, you imagine the nightly rate being the same for a Motel 6 and a Ritz-Carlton. You can't even get that computation in your head right. Yet now value matters. So is it going to force the real estate brokers to reduce their compensation? No. Will some reduce their compensation? Probably, because they're going to operate with low value. And we're going to choose not to do that. On Wednesday at 1:30, we've got our 6 top agents that are going through everything around this settlement and how they're handling it, all their best practice scripts. We're pumping the marketing out for this today. But just for a little tag, it's Abby Shepard out of Buckhead, Laramella Edwards out of West Cobb, Ryan Graham and Ashley Skeen out of Intown, Cynthia Bear out of Decatur, and Brenda Dollar out of South Fulton. And I asked them the tough questions like, what are you hearing? What are people asking you, and how are you responding? And I think it'll be really, really amazing, their perspective. So mark your calendar, 1:30 on Wednesday. That's coming. The next one says, the settlement will prohibit sellers from paying a commission to a buyer's agent. I mean, where are they getting these taglines? You know, one of the things that I think is really interesting is pricing has everything to do with the relationship between supply and demand. It has nothing to do with the real estate commission inside of it. Yet sellers actually have a choice. They can either choose to influence the demand on their property, or they can choose to push away some of the demand on their property. And the reality is, Toya, if I was listing a house that was $300,000 and it's in that first time home buyer category, what percentage of the buyers do you think could actually afford to pay a commission?
Very small. Very
Maybe
small.
10%, maybe if we're being lucky. So Mr. Seller, I don't have an exact data, but I'm going to tell you from experience, 90% of the people that can buy your home can't afford to pay their own commission. So here's my question. Do you want to advertise this property to the 10% that might be able to pay for it, or advertise this property to 100%? Because what I know is advertising it to 100% actually puts the most money in your pocket at the end of the day. Do you want to influence the demand on your property? And I think most sellers would make a good decision in that situation. But if you talk about it as their cost, they're always going to come from a place of scarcity. If you talk about it as their opportunity, their influence, they're going to lean into that conversation. And I think that's really where this is going, is it doesn't prohibit a seller from paying a commission. It just made it more of a conversation.
And I agree with you, Brett. I think the other part is when you're thinking about that first-time home buyer, I think many sellers want home buyers. I don't know that they want investors all the time. And I think that when they know that they're helping a home buyer to come in, I've always found that has, been one of the best wins when we're talking about a win-win. It makes them feel good knowing that they were able to help someone come in and live who wants to actually be a part of that community.
There you
It's
go.
always been about net profit. And if what the media does is prey on emotion, and you've got to fight the emotion with logic. And logic is even more powerful when you position it like you did, Brett, with a question. What's your goal? What outcome gives you, the greatest smile on your face? And then how do we achieve it? Even the 10% that could pay their own commission, do you think the other 90% of the homes available that are paying, would that not be more attractive? So even if they could, they still might choose another home with an incentive that encourages a 3% bonus or benefit to their net gain in purchasing it. So it may be even worse than 90-10. So is it, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, is it worth that risk, or should we stay the path of higher certainty and just make sure that we land on your net, and we'll price in whatever expense or investment it takes to make sure you're at the highest level of marketability?
Yep.
And it's a rhetorical question, but if you start telling people, you feed that emotion. If you start asking people, you move that conversation into a more logic-based, a cerebral conversation where people make wise decisions when they have under limited duress, when they have time to consider it, and you're giving them free rein to pass their own judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I asked those top agents that are going to be interviewed on Wednesday at 1:30 that specific question, and I want to hear how they respond. And the third one says the settlement will relieve sellers of any financial burden of buyer's agent fees. I don't think so. Gary Keller made a comment in his top agent mastermind over at the end of last week. And what he said is, I believe buyer's agent will get a buyer brokerage agreement signed, and the buyer's agent will make an offer that includes the commission agreed upon, but will ask the seller to pay it. This will most likely become best practice, meaning I made a comment. I think agents will start submitting their offers with an executive summary sheet, not a cover letter. We got into fair housing issues when we started sending pictures of buyers and trying to tell stories and all that stuff. But I do think you're going to submit an executive summary attached with your offer saying, I have my buyer under a buyer representation agreement for 3%. We're offering this. We're asking the sellers to pay this. This is our net offer to you, Mr. and Miss Seller. Attached, here's the offer. And I think we're going to be presenting offers with our commission attached to it. And then I thought about this, like if a seller, in the past, the MLS was guaranteeing the 3%, right? Like we kind of normalized that across the industry. But if Toya, you had a house listed and I call you and I say, what are you offering from a buyer agent compensation? And you said, we're offering 3% with an acceptable offer. Does that mean you're guaranteeing me 3%? What if I come and lowball your offer?
And that
I think it's negotiable, right? That's really what this settlement means. So, I think you could say we're offering a 3% with acceptable offer. I think that's really what it means. And the commission is 100% negotiable until the time the contract is signed. And that's different.
You know what I think this also does? We found so many, times that agents at the end of it, oh my goodness, they reduced my commission. This just puts everything on the table up front. So therefore, you know exactly what you're getting paid because it's negotiated up front. So I think it's a good thing in order for us to know how we're going to get paid, because there's so many times that you have that adjustable rate commission, and depending on the offer and negotiations throughout, there may be a slight cut in the commission. So I think that this is a conversation, just another concession to ask the seller to make.
Yeah, there you go. Well, just so we make sure we hit them all, the settlement ultimately reduces the total cost of transaction services as sellers will no longer pay buyer's agent compensation. We've hit that, but that's a headline, right? The settlement will serve to lower real estate prices. I want to make sure people are really clear on this. The settlement has zero to do with prices. Prices are completely a derivative of the relationship between supply and demand. And the fees inside of that, the rationale is that the seller would choose to sell at a lower rate because of less fees. But I'm telling you, I don't know if you've ever worked with a seller that would choose to sell at a lower rate for anything. So the reality is this is very false and it needs to get squashed, because our compensation has absolutely nothing to do with the price property sells for. And then the settlement is a fantastic win for buyers who will now be able to negotiate the fee for representation. Really? Because now they are supposed to pay for it. I do think there will be some people that are bad apples in the industry, guys. And I do think we will have a little bit of a Wild West for a period of time. But I would remind you that there's a cost to doing business. And at some point in time, if they choose to diminish their value, they'll actually be writing their exit strategy from the industry because they're not going to be able to afford to do it. And, but that doesn't mean it won't stop somebody from doing it. It will happen. But just be aware of that. And then the seventh one is the settlement will result in a significant restitution for real estate consumers who are harmed. Here's the numbers, guys. If somebody got paid out from the class action lawsuit, it's going to work out to be about $10 per person. You might as well just go to Starbucks. Yet the lawyers got 80 million. And nobody is making money on this whole thing except the lawyers. And the reality is this wasn't about money except for the lawyers, but it was about changing our industry, and they have succeeded in what they wanted to do in that regard. But the narrative around people getting paid out, $10, I mean, let's get real, right? So, Rick, Toya, I mean, what do we need to have in our heads as we're going into this second quarter? It's April 1st. Don't tell me a joke, but tell me what I need to be focused on.
I think finding the opportunities, I think sharpening your skill sets. We have done a great job as a company, as a leadership team, as agents coming in, really talking about the tough conversations and the elephant in the room. So certainly having dialogues, scripting is going to be so important in terms of what type of conversations do we have with our buyers and sellers, and then looking for the opportunities. There's always a silver lining in all of this. And if we look more optimistically to find out those silver linings and what the MOFRs are, and use this third-party information in terms of just educating ourselves and our clients, I think we'll always be on the side of winning.
Yeah, it's
There you
always
go.
been a numbers game. It always will be a numbers game. And then it's about value and conversion. But if you're not contacting enough people to convert and feed your family, you're going to fail in the new environment. If you don't migrate in your scripts and your skills and your value proposition in a way that puts you in the top 20, 30, 40%, you're probably going to suffer as well, while the rest of the industry basically takes a lead. And then eventually you may catch up, or in some cases, some of our agents may bleed out and have to find new, occupations, which isn't the worst thing that's happened. It'll help skew some of the percentages of opportunity and, per agent, per closing, or per available inventory. So this is just another opportunity to prove that you're the boss and that you've got your hands around it, and that you're capable of again, scripting scenarios that create wins for buyers and sellers that supersede competition.
There you go. Happy Monday, everybody.
Happy Monday.